Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Art of the Game here on Cabbit Crossing's YouTube channel, where we, some three experienced GMs, talk about different game master tips. Make sure to subscribe so you can catch all the episodes. We also have a playlist podcast, and this was originally the brainchild of Woody. So, Woody, why don't you tell us what the episode title is, or what the topic is for today?
Okay, so I have this philosophy of being a game master where I was thinking about it one day and I realized that the only reason why the players are, or the player characters are alive is because me as the game master have not chosen to kill them. Because unfortunately as the GM, you wield a great deal of godlike power within the context of this, made up universe. And so when I started considering where that logical argument takes you, it became very apparent that if I have that power, then my job is not actually to kill them. My job is to challenge them, right? And so it's completely fine for someone to die, some character to die, because people can get stupid, or they pick off a fight they can't win, or any number of scenarios, right? Hopefully it's dramatic and really cool. Like we actually had one just like a couple weeks ago where one of the players went out like a boss. But there is a point where some GMs think that I've heard of game masters who believe that they need to make sure somebody dies like in the first or second session so that people know their stakes, and that's kind of a rough one because people get really passionate about these characters, right? And it's a question of how how deadly you should make the game. And in the classic sense of the original D&D game, obviously it was very much kill or be killed. But in modern gaming, we're way more sophisticated. We have new options and new storytelling, and like GMs are supposed to be better, right? And have more styles of doing things. And so I think that what the players are there for is to be challenged, because and it makes sense, because if everybody dies, then your story ends. And this thing that you're trying to do as a game master completely fails. And you don't necessarily want the campaign to end with a completely different set of characters that have no emotional connection to the beginning of the campaign. So what do you guys think?
I do think there's value in somehow showing that there's stakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, you have to do it through challenging them, right? If there's a couple ways that happens in my games naturally, usually someone's going to get knocked out at some point, right?
Yeah.
And in 5e, for instance, you have the death saves. The first time they roll death saves, I tell them, I'm rolling it for you. I'm not going to tell you what it was. Right?
Okay.
In fact, one time I had that happen. The first someone died in this campaign, I rolled it and I said, oh, that's interesting. And they're all like, what does that mean? And I actually rolled a natural one. And the guy ended up dying because of it.
Oh, no.
It wasn't the first session, by the way. It was a few sessions in, at least. But that kind of thing shows that there are stakes, though, because when they can't even see what the death save roll is, it's suddenly like, oh, it's actually important to bring this guy up, which brings the whole thing of, oh, you can actually die and things like that. I do think 5e has a problem where it's like really hard to die sometimes, but but that's also because people can metagame and be like, whoa, they failed twice, so they still have one more, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But so I do think it's important to show stakes. I do agree that killing them, like trying to kill them on purpose, is a bad way to go about it. I would actually, in fact, avoid killing someone unless they really did like stupid actions, I guess. But avoid trying to kill someone in the first session. It's kind of it actually is a really crappy feeling for the player, because you're like, I made this character, I was all about ready to play them, and it's just like, oh, don't get to. Okay.
Yeah.
So even if that happens, I'd be like, oh, you can just play your brother. That's exactly like you if you want.
Yeah, but your identical twin.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Yeah. But so I agree with that for the most part. I do think there's more to the job of a GM than just giving them a challenge, actually. And in fact, sometimes you don't even need to. I learned something before I played Waterdeep. I played that one a while ago. But before I played it for the first time, and I was a player in it, not even running it, I learned something valuable, which is not every combat needs to be a challenge. Not every situation needs to be a challenge. In fact, if you have a lot of mini things that lead to a hard challenge, that actually often comes back. That comes out much better. Like if there's a couple of thugs attacking someone, and you just go and easily get rid of them. That could be actually interesting for lead up to other things. It actually pulls you into a story a bit because you would expect those guys to be weak. You don't have to make every challenge be something where one person goes unconscious. So I guess it depends what you mean by your job is to make it a challenge, but just as long as you mean that challenge doesn't necessarily need to be combat, right? It can be many different type of things.
Social.
Well, like a challenge by challenging, what I of course mean is that like they're feeling the threat, they're feeling the squeeze, they're feeling like something is going on that they feel threatened by, or they feel like it's hard to overcome, right? And sometimes just the challenges not knowing, like, okay, well, there's a trap they're trying to disarm, right? And I think that the players should feel like the world they're in is a little dangerous, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to kill them, but if they feel like it's dangerous or there's risk, right? And if they have that feeling, then they are going to feel that challenge, right? And they shouldn't be in a situation where they believe that everything's a cakewalk and they're always going to win, right? And they're if they're going up against a challenge, like or some threat or some encounter of some kind, there has to be a way for them to actually win. They actually have to have a potential to achieve. And if they're about to fight something where there's no hope of success, and they feel like they're in that situation, that's pretty rough. And I think that goes against making things fun in the game by quite a bit. But to deliberately put them in a situation where, okay, well, there's a trap in this dungeon that will smash them with a plate that will condemn and squish them to death if they make one mistake, that is horrible. Don't do that. But that's classic game design, in 1974. Yeah.
And what was the Tomb of Annihilation? Was there something like, I forgot that really painful.
Oh yeah,
dungeon crawl.
I know the one you're talking about because it's a classic dungeon, and like half the stuff in there will kill the players.
Just killing one hit, yeah.
Yeah. The only reason that you got out of that alive is because you were lucky, and that's not good. Everything. That is not good game design. But
no. Yeah, unless you're going into it like that, right? But Tomb of Horrors. That's it.
Yeah, I would say there's some OSR players that would disagree. It'd been interesting to get one of them GMs in here, because there are some of them versions of OSR. They like their funnel, like they like to have 0 level characters who die.
Tomb of Horror was by Gary Gygax himself, right?
Yeah, that was one of the original dungeons. But the people that are playing like the OSR. We're describing, I think, Dungeon Crawl Classics is what you were just referencing, and so
there's a lot of different variations. But
the people playing those games are looking for that classic experience. Like they want it to be deadly. Yeah.
And they know, and that's what I would say is like it's kind of the system in a way. Like I don't think I have. I mean, I don't know. Greg would speak better. I don't think people are too afraid, or I don't think people are. When I play Call of Cthulhu, I think people are already kind of nervous a little bit, and they already feel the danger.
well, they know they're playing Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, that's right. It's the reputation, because I had the same thing when I did Delta Green many years ago. It's a similar system, and so that's where a system I think helps a little bit, because there's not as much wiggle room for combat, and where when you do something in combat, there could be consequences. Whereas in D&D there isn't. Like you have especially higher levels, you have a huge buffer of points, and then you can recover those points with one night rest or something, right? So that makes
long rest. Restores legs, missing parts, brain matter, whatever.
It doesn't, though. It doesn't. This is actually something I made a point of clarifying when I was writing my version of a 5e RPG, where and I think this is important for GMs to consider. Like you just brought up a good point there, Greg, because like there's this idea that you have your long rest and then you're fully healed, and you're actually not. you've basically like you get your wind back, right? Because like person can be beat. Like you look at these guys that are like MMA fighters or boxers, and they get beat to shit, right? But they give them a few minutes to recover, and they can get back into it, and they can keep going, right?
Most of the time, yeah.
It's kind of like the short rest phenomenon in D&D, but where you can spend your hit dice to heal, but like the injuries they sustained are not gone. They've just had a chance to to like get their wind back, and so in that kind of a context, like you look at a hit point pool, and it doesn't necessarily represent durability; it represents other factors. It represents like will to live. It represents potentially your ability to evade getting hit, or your tolerance for pain, right? And so it isn't just a durability pool, and so like when these characters
say my level 1 character can't take pain, is that what you're saying?
Maybe not as well as a guy.
Stubbed my toe, critical for fumble.
Yeah. But like, yeah. See, that thing is like you're in a fight, you get run through with a sword, right? Now a GM should be imposing a penalty for that injury, right? And so you've got 100 hit points. Somebody impales you with a sword, legit. Yeah, maybe it's only 8 damage. But they pull that sword out, you are going to be bleeding to death. You don't have to have a special ability to gain that penalty.
We should have an entire episode on this, actually, probably, to talk about different ways of dealing with injuries.
No, totally.
Because I also have one too. It's like you get knocked out, you get a level of exhaustion in my games. Totally. And it's just like you have to sleep them off and stuff.
Yeah, and so you now have penalties, right? And so yes, you've got your hit points back. You still have a hole in your gut, right? And if you don't have a cleric in the party who can magically heal it, but even if he did, really, is there a point where like, does that healing spell, if you're just doing the level and healing spell, how powerful is it really? And you could have a situation where this hole in your gut is now a vulnerability, where a hit to that location can now impose a pain risk. It can tear open your stitches. You might, start bleeding again.
Let's go through this in another one, because I think there's a lot to this.
Because
you also have to think about how when you give injuries and stuff like that too.
Yeah,
because there's different game systems do different things. Like in Mythras, they have different wound levels that heal different rates and blah blah.
But I think stuff like this is, again
has something.
I mean, it does fall under the challenge category, right? And
give
them
real injuries. Yeah.
Well, because like a lot of this stuff really comes down to how you, as a game master, are going to run your game, and they don't clarify these things sometimes in the rules, but you can absolutely do it, and there's nothing stopping you from doing it. And quite frankly, your players might object a little bit at first, but once they realize, it's actually making the game more fun, I think they're going to be on board. I've never had anybody really, object to this.
The other thing I do at the very beginning, because you can just set the stage with players and let them feel the challenge just by certain rules you have. Because everyone has their homebrew rules. If you don't have homebrew rules, what are you doing, man? But the the one of them is I don't make resurrection free, and I don't mean like no gold cost. I mean it might not work. And the way I do that is I give them a skill challenge, which is usually in some dream sequence that they have to pass in order for the resurrection to actually work. And it starts out easy, right?
Yeah.
And then it gets harder and harder if you keep dying more. So that usually just telling players that usually makes them think twice about going in and potentially dying.
Doesn't Matt Mercer do a thing where like your first resurrection is easy, and then
he does it the opposite? And I did that at first, and I didn't like it. So he does it to where other people can come and talk to the dead person and give them a bonus to the roll, basically. And then he does the roll behind the screen. But I prefer the person who's dead to actually have agency to be resurrected themselves.
Well, it was my understanding that there was a thing where like each time you go get a resurrection, it gets more difficult.
It gets harder and harder.
Yeah.
And I do the same. The skill challenge becomes harder and harder each time.
Oh, go ahead, Marks.
Yeah, and it should be from a fiction standpoint. If somebody can just be like resurrect you, there'd be no. Yeah, it would change the world quite a bit. Just one high level cleric. Yeah.
Well, in D&D, it's kind of a revolving door in a lot of ways. In Palladium, which is what I played that for the most over the years. Like death is basically you're done. Like there is resurrections from clerics, but it's a roll of the dice. Like it probably won't work. and so like you can get it, but it's just it's not a guarantee. And
I think Daggerheart does it pretty well. They basically, if you're a high level Seraph, which is their cleric, you get resurrection, and you get it once your entire character's life. You can resurrect once. So if you can imagine, if your character dies and you have to try to find someone to resurrect you, it's got to be rough, hard to do.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a pretty good idea too. But there's probably many ways to deal with it.
Good story potential there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think resurrections are fine. It's just, you know, how you're going to handle it. It has to be like it needs to advance the story. There's got to be a reason to do it. If you're playing D&D, it's probably like, okay, well, raise me, bring me back. It's like no big deal. But you know, there's also a question of how long you've been dead. And and if somebody's been dead long enough to be reborn, they're not coming back.
Yeah.
Or they're going to smell.
And like I said, I do the thing. I said do. I'm sorry. I do the thing where if someone gets knocked unconscious, I give them a level exhaustion. Sometimes even more than one level exhaustion. And if they get knocked unconscious twice, it really builds up. And you're talking about someone having to rest for days and days when they get knocked
concussion.
out. Yeah. And so, especially if you do the newer D&D, which I'm not going to buy because I don't feel like spending the money on it. I know you got a great deal, but the
I don't appreciate it though.
The exhaustion in it though, they just give a -1 to all your rolls basically. Whenever you get a level exhaustion, it just stacks -1s, and that's pretty good too. I think.
It's a simple way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think you could use those a lot for injuries and stuff, where you got this injury, it's gonna cost you a -1 to pretty much everything you do, and it's gonna keep stacking if you make it worse. It's not a bad idea.
Just got to be careful about Death Spiral. That's the only thing you have to worry about.
Yes. Well, I do something similar in my Cyber Symbiosis game, where when you get a serious injury, there is basically an effective proficiency penalty that it stacks. And so the more of these injuries you get, I mean, it is a stacking -1, but it eventually gets so bad that you have to stop. And there's lots of ways. Yeah, well, no, but you have to go get medical treatment. I mean, the injury condition isn't something that can be healed by a cleric. So magic healing does not fix it. It's a matter of days, and you can heal faster if a doctor, you get treatment from a doctor, or lots of magic healing, I suppose. But it is something that just takes time. So.
I like talking about Daggerheart because it is a very unique system, even though it's not my favorite, but it's very unique, which I like, which is you have a hope and fear currency in that system, and you can have up to 5 hope on your character. And whenever you get knocked unconscious, if you want to come back, you lose a hope permanently by taking an injury. And if you lose all your hope, you have to retire. Like, you can't even continue with that character. If you somehow lived, by the way, because as part of when you go unconscious or when you go down to 0, you can actually choose to go out in a blaze of glory by getting a free crit on anything you want, but you die. You can choose to just survive, but it hurts. You have to narrate how it kind of hurts what the battle that's going on, but you can just choose to survive, right? And then you lose one of your hope. And there's another one, I forget what it is. But anyways, the point is, if you come back so much, you lose all your hope and you have to retire as a character. So I thought that was kind of unique too.
That's interesting. So to kill or not to kill a character.
Yeah, what do we the bullet points we have right now are try not to do it on the first session, maybe even the second session, right? You do want to avoid it on the first couple of sessions. Make sure they feel a challenge.
Yes.
In some way or another, especially if you're combat focused campaign. If you're not a combat focused campaign, there's other ways to challenge them socially, whatever. And then make them actually feel if they just feel like they're never threatened, introduce injuries, and do it anyways if you want. Introduce ways that they can feel the threat of combat without actually dying. There's a lot of ways to do it. We just talked about it.
Yeah. I think that's what we talked about. I think that should be a standard part of the game regardless. Because people can get their hands chopped off. They can, they can have an injury to where their arm is crippled for a while, and there's all kinds of ways. Like, people can lose eyes. They can get concussions. They could get impaled. These things have lasting consequences, and they don't just go away. And like just because somebody casts a healing spell on you doesn't mean that is completely healed by healing magic. Healing magic should have limits on its effectiveness. It shouldn't just, get. And you could also, let's say you got a broken bone, that healing spell should fuse the bone wrong. Like that should be a very real risk, and you're healing.
My wrist is in my head.
Exactly, or you're shot, right, and you get that healing spell. Those bullets
now
are now
a permanent bullet in there.
Yeah, you've healed around that bullet, and now that hurts, and that like
the Iron Man thing where you have to keep a battery there now.
Yes, exactly. Like those are very real and very very practical ways to handle these situations, and they work very well, and it makes your cleric think twice about just healing during a battle too.
Yeah, and you can even introduce not even injuries but scars, which I know the other one that Darrington Press does, which is their Call of Cthulhu
Candela Obscura.
Candela Obscura. If you go unconscious and you survive, right, you get what's called a scar, and in that you have to pick 2 stats that you put up 1 and down 1 and represent how narratively that scar has changed your character. Perhaps you went up a bit more in wisdom but down in strength. Right, because you've learned from it or something like that. Yeah, so
that's fun.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, and Rune Quest and Mythras and those kind of games, they have old school hit point locations and stuff, and you can go negative, and so you can either get minor wounds, which is you're positive when you're starting to drop hit points, but you're still positive. You can get serious wounds. I think I get the right term. When you go negative, and of course you hit 0, it's major. And there's rows there for falling conscious or dying, but there's also rows in there, like if you hit an arm where you can get them shattered or cut off and stuff. So that's interesting. And you get specials where you can actually impale someone doing extra damage and description and stuff like that.
Well, and that's an interesting point too. I talk about this in my RPG a little bit, but like in D&D, they don't really put a distinction on, and they never really have, on like, a shot to your arm wouldn't actually affect your hit points at all, right? Like if you took 100 points of damage to cut your hand off, that should not kill you. And so
unless you bleed to death, but
right. But that's something else, right?
And a lightsaber would cauterize the wound.
That's true. Yeah.
But like taking a shot to a limb, that limb could be disabled, and that could be a consequence to a certain kind of injury, which is where like these these hit location dice are kind of fun. And
it could kill you in a couple hours.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe you could get a gangrenous, injury. But like it's an interesting idea that some of these wounds, they can be devastatingly effective, but have inflicted no hit point damage.
Yeah, I like the idea. It's a balance between where it doesn't slow down the game, but adds color to it and stuff. And
for sure.
Different games do it different ways.
Yep.
Yeah.
And as a GM, you can have this in however you like too.
Yeah, high adventure role playing. If you ever want to look into it, HARP is what it's called. They have giant graphs of injuries and stuff for every single type of damage type, and it's a D100 system, so it works for that, and it's pretty interesting. It's another way to go about it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
anywho,
I feel like we have an episode, Marks.
Yeah, I think so. And remember, and I think that's another important part to remember too, is about killing. If you want, like you said, you could threaten them socially, kill their reputation, steal their money, all their money. That can really upset people. Destroy a magical item.
Okay.
There's a lot of different ways to kill or create intensity there.
I will say, kind of getting back to our PvP episode, taking people's money sometimes will piss them off more than losing their character.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I did a campaign once where it was Delta Green and someone got a gun and it was a special kind of rifle. I didn't know anything about the gun. And the creature comes out and like just destroys this gun, right? And I'm thinking like, well, it didn't kill you or anything. And he just like, he like got literally upset. And I'm like, your character, if you survive this, you can just buy another one. What are you freaking out for?
I had a similar thing. I was doing the dragon heist again with a different group. And they were bickering, they were fighting with each other, they were having these moral qualms back and forth, they disagreed. Then they got back to their tavern and there was a sign that their competition put up that said rat infested on their tavern. they all came together immediately and like hated that other person so much.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So there's different things you can do. All right. So everybody, if you enjoyed this, make sure, of course, like it and all that good stuff, but also leave a comment. Tell us about your experience with killing characters, players, and what you think about
this
it.
Thing.
The thing over there, down there, over there. and leave a comment and we'll respond. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well,
And
thanks everyone, and subscribe. Yes, please do. Ring that bell and all that good stuff. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and until next time.
When the dice roll high, we touch the sky, but when they crash, it's a belly laugh. Genre play lighting the way. Our tales are